Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another video. This time it's going to be a video game video. I'm not going to be really showing anything. It's just something that I'm going to talk about because this video was requested by a couple of viewers. It's basically my approach to buying video games. Well, like many out there, those of whom that may watch this video or not, my approach to collecting video games is very simple. I don't collect for investment. I collect because I like the game. I like the series. I like the genre. I came into getting video games back in the 80s when a couple years after the Nintendo came out. So that's where my origins with video games comes from. It just so happened that down the line I started to collect some games, but I wanted to collect some games that I heard were pretty good. For instance, I like horror games. Okay? Now, although horror games back in the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, and even the Genesis era, there might have been a few, but not many. It wasn't until the PlayStation came out, or at least here in the United States, and I'm pretty sure in Europe too, where horror games really started to become mainstream. Games like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and Echo Knight, and Clock Tower, and all those other great games came out, really started to give the genre some life. That didn't happen until the PlayStation, until the mid to late 90s. So I fell in love with games like that. So I would try to, at that time and years later, try to collect games that were similar to that. And there were a ton of similar games, more for me to remember. I would have to look at some of the games back here. This is where I keep my PlayStation stuff. Starting at the top of PS1, then we get to PS2, 3, and 4 on the bottom. But that's that's my approach to collecting games. And like I said, horror games are some of my favorites. Another genre that I like to collect for, that I try to, like for instance, I'm a big PlayStation fan, so I try to collect all of that particular genre or series on that platform. Like I just mentioned, survival horror. Well, I try to get all the Resident Evils. I had my original Resident Evil was the jewel case version, but there was a long box variant, which was actually the first release. And even though it's the same game, it's a little more sought out than the regular jewel case release of Resident Evil. Even though it's the same game, I still wanted it for my collection. And that's another way I go about things. If it has multiple releases, let's say a long box and a jewel case or different artwork, I try to get them. There are quite a few out there that are like that. Some come with the greatest hits artwork, and I know a lot of PlayStation gamers don't necessarily like that artwork, but it's still a variant. If you like the game, you get it. That's the way I look at it. But another genre that I like to collect for is role-playing games. Now, role-playing games have been a staple in Japanese homes for many, many years. It wasn't until maybe Final Fantasy VII here in the West where they started to become mainstream, like I was talking about earlier, with games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Although Japan may have had horror games before, like the original Clock Tower for Super Nintendo and Sweet Home for the regular Nintendo, years before Resident Evil came out, it wasn't necessarily mainstream here in the West until Resident Evil and Silent Hill. And it's the same could be said for Final Fantasy. Yes, Super Nintendo had Final Fantasy, Nintendo had Dragon Warrior, which were immensely popular in Japan, but it had its niche here. And then they continued with Final Fantasy 2 and 3 for Super Nintendo here, Chrono Trigger, Tecmo Secret of the Stars, Secret of Mana, and the list goes on. And Super Nintendo had quite a few RPGs, and I think it was gaining momentum. But when Squaresoft decided to abandon Nintendo because Nintendo wanted to make cartridge-based games, and it just wasn't what Square wanted to do. They wanted to make disc-based games, and went to Sony and released Final Fantasy VII. I think the West really started to catch on to role-playing games, and after that, it was just a flood of them that came out. A lot of them were really, really good. So I try to collect all the RPGs for the PlayStation. I pretty much have them all, too. I try to get as many as I can for PlayStation 2. But that's just the way I collect. I really narrow in on a few systems. I don't collect for Nintendo. I don't collect the Sega Master System or the handheld games. I mean, I have some of them. But I wouldn't say I collect for them. I don't collect Super Nintendo or anything like that, or Nintendo 64. Like I said, I might get a game every now and then, but I don't really consider myself a collector of those. I do have a decent amount, but I really like to collect for the PlayStation 2, the Sega Saturn, the Sega Genesis, and that's pretty much it. I collect a little bit here for the original Xbox, and I also like to collect for the Sega CD. But here's the thing. A lot of those games that I like to collect, that I like to have, that interest me, not only do once I get them, I play them. I just don't collect them to collect them. But if there are people out there that collect just to collect, they don't collect to play, that's fine too. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm mainly a comic book collector, and I don't read all the comic books I collect, and I know there are plenty others out there that are in the same boat. I'm sure there are purists out there that say, hey, if you buy a comic book, you need to play it. Hey, you buy a game, you need to play it. I can understand that too. But I tend to be the one that plays the games that I get. Okay? So I try to collect certain genres. That's my approach to collecting games. I do not collect games to fill runs. Like, I'm not working on a PlayStation 1 set. I'm not trying to get every PlayStation 1 game. I'm not trying to get every PlayStation 2 game or Sega CD game or try to get all the greatest hits labels. No. There are plenty of greatest hits labels out there for games that I like but I don't love, and plenty of games that I don't like. I'm not just going to buy them for the sake of buying them. So that's my approach to video game collecting. I buy what I like. I buy what I think I could play. And many times I don't get to it because I have such a backlog when it comes to playing games, but that's okay. Eventually I will get to it. I purchased the game Gladius in 2002 for the PlayStation 2. I just started playing it now. I played a little bit of it back then, but I just was so overwhelmed with other games. Playing it now, and I'm enjoying it very much. Hey, it happens that way sometimes. Now, I know some people might want some prices and trends and all that stuff. I'm not the guy for that. If you want prices for video games, and trends and all that stuff, go to Price Charting. I can make this video game. I could have made this same video a year ago and showcase. Let me see what I got here. Here we are. I could have made this video a year ago and told you that this game right here, opened but complete, would probably cost you about $175. Now, if you watch the same video today, that information would be obsolete because this game now trends anywhere between $275 and $300. Why? I have no idea. I have it. I've had it for a while because it is a horror game, and I enjoyed playing it, and it was creepy. And that's the sort of stuff that I collect. As I said before, that's my approach to collecting. But if you really want up-to-date prices, just like I would tell people who collect comic books, oh, how come you don't put prices in your game and your videos? Other people do, and I understand that. Other people do put prices in their games, and that's great, in their videos. That's fine. I don't, for many reasons. But one of the reasons is because I think it could become obsolete pretty quickly. Someone could stumble upon this video 3 months from now, and the price could either go up or go down or stay the same. You don't know. But the best information I can give you, the best advice I could give you when looking for prices on anything, whether it's comic books, video games, each have their own respected following. Price Charting for video games. GPA for comic books. There are plenty of free sites out there. I remember when I made my video about comic books, people were telling me all these different free sites that where you could check prices on video games I never even heard of. There's a wealth of information out there from viewers and people that would love nothing more than to help you find exactly what you're looking for. But that's my advice. Go to price charting and you could see the latest trends and what a loose copy is selling for, what a complete copy is selling for, and what a mint in box copy is selling for. This really is a great game. I advise you to get it, but it is, like I just said, very, very expensive. One more example with that. Same thing with this one. Rule of Rose. About a year ago, I could have told you this was trending at maybe $150. Now it's trending, I think, around $250. So it changes. What makes that change? I have no idea. I have no idea why Rule of Rose was this price a year ago, and now it seems to be going up in value. No clue. I wish I knew. And if I knew, I would tell you. I just don't know. It's a little different with video games. Sometimes with comic books, well, why was this book going up? Oh, it's because this character was announced in a movie. Ah, okay. Well, why is this game going up? I don't know. I don't know. Other than Kuon and Rule of Rose being rare games, you know, sometimes people, their interest spikes in these things. The interest in retro games has spiked. That's why so many newer games are trying to recapture that retro look, that Nintendo or Super Nintendo look. It happens. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. I like listening to people and their comments, so please leave comments. And if you have any other suggestions for a video game video, I will make them in the comments section. I'll see what I could do. Thanks, everyone. Take care.